Hello, everybody. Welcome to Saturday night in Starfleet Tactical. My name is Chris Weave, as always. Pat, you're still Pat Doyle, right?
I am.
So,
good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for.
As is always the case, nothing we say is the opinion of our employer, past, present, or future. Let's just get that out of the way. Okay, I've checked that box. We can go on. So, Pat, how was your week?
Yeah, average. I spent it in ground school, so I was doing my recurrent tests and training and stuff like that, which we have to do every year, which somehow seems to still happen about every 9 months.
So basically, this was you being the student as opposed to you being the instructor?
Correct. Yep.
So. Yeah, I've got some annual training for work tomorrow that I'm going to have to do, and I'm just not looking forward to it.
Yeah, but we do it via WebEx now. So as opposed to going and sitting in the classroom for a day, now we, sit at our house in pajamas with the video turned off and go through the classes and stuff. So, frankly, I don't mind. It saves me the half-hour drive there, half-hour drive back. But yeah, so it's not too bad.
Tell me more about these classes. What sort of subjects are you covering?
Oh, gosh. Well, we cover very exciting things like dangerous goods, to make sure that we don't put dangerous goods on the airplane and all the rules involving that. We go over, what else was there?
Is it lots of legal requirement stuff?
Well, like you just don't want flammable things or things that are going to possibly catch on fire to be put on the airplane. And so basically hazmat, right? Has any hazardous materials. People like to bring aboard, a lot of luggage have batteries in them now and stuff like that, right? Every now and then those things catch on fire. So, but at the same time, you don't want to store a bunch of that kind of stuff in the cargo bays and that sort of thing. So
because they catch on fire and a fire isn't any better. At least if the fire happens in the cabin, somebody will go, "Hey, there's a fire. Maybe I should do something about that."
Yes, and there's a chance there. So yeah. Anyway, so we do that. We go over aircraft systems. We go over just some general rules and regulate. It's a lot of sort of nitnoid stuff you don't use frequently, but it's good to review it every now and then, and just general security type stuff and that kind of thing. So, so yeah, I mean it's all good stuff to review every year, but it's not necessarily everybody's favorite way to spend an afternoon, but good, like a lot of important things, it may not be super exciting, but it's still good to review it. And then that gets followed up later on by 3 simulator sessions where they run us through various emergencies and all that kind of stuff, culminating in a check ride. And that's the annual thing everybody gets to go through. So but they don't teach us to do fun things like fly the plane under bridges or do aileron rolls in an airliner or anything like that. So, not super exciting, but usually people aren't on an airliner looking for super exciting. So
yes.
Our goal is to deliver them as boring and unthrilling an experience as possible.
So a few people commented on the spam shirt, just to let you all know. I bought this at the Spam Museum in Austin, Minnesota. I am from Des Moines, Iowa, originally. Pat, of course, is in Minneapolis. Austin, Minnesota is just about at the halfway point between those two locations on Interstate 35. It's right across, right when you cross the border into Minnesota, and it is the headquarters of Hormel. And the Spam Museum used to be located at Hormel corporate headquarters. They've since moved it downtown. I actually preferred the old one. The old one was a little bit bigger museum, and I thought was a little bit better job at it. But you can buy all sorts of Spam stuff. My brother Delon bought me some spam flip-flops because he heard me talk about them, and I kept saying, maybe next time I'll buy the spam flip-flops. They've got cutouts in the sole so that when you walk on the beach, it leaves an impression behind that says spam, 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 spam as you walk on the beach. And so I may take those with me next time I go to Hawaii. But I also will frequently buy spam there because there's like 11 or 12 different varieties of spam. There's way more different types of spam than you think. And somewhere I've got a spam lanyard that in my last job, I would occasionally have to go places where you weren't supposed to, like you weren't allowed to drive a government vehicle because it wasn't an acknowledged place. That wasn't acknowledged that that's a government office. And so sometimes I'd wear my University of Iowa lanyard, but frequently I'd wear my spam lanyard. So, but it was time for the spam t-shirt. So,
cool.
But so I had one of those days. It was mostly just sitting at the desk working my tail off with but now we're doing more stuff in person. There's one particular meeting where we kind of concluded we need to do it in person because it's one of those brainstorming sorts of things, and it would be really hard to do over VTC. So it's hard enough to do in person. And it's going to be one of those projects that's going to suck up just huge amounts of my life for a while. So, Pat, did you go away?
Nope, still here.
I was just about to say thank you for the show. Everybody, that's the show. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for showing up.
So Pat, what do you want to do this week?
Well, so today I thought we would do something a little different, or something we haven't done before anyways, but still within the topic of the show and generally what we try to do. So today we are going to talk about the duel between a Constitution-class starship and a Klingon D7 battlecruiser. And we're going to basically walk through a battle and the strengths and weaknesses of both ships, and we'll walk through this battle, and then at the end we'll just sort of talk about who made what mistakes, what each captain did right, what each captain did wrong, maybe what should have been anticipated and stuff. And Chris will put on his military naval analyst hat and give us some insights onto the battle. And so that's what we're going to do. So we'll talk about the setup for the battle, and then we'll just kind of briefly talk about each of the ships, and then we'll walk through the battle, and then we'll do a little analysis on the battle and see how it went, see whether the D7 or the Constitution class cruiser came out on top in this battle. So let's see. And all right. So so this is kind of the iconic battle. If you ever played the old FASA Starship Combat game, you had an opportunity to take Captain Kirk's Enterprise against Klingon battle cruiser, or if you played Starfleet Battles, or if you played the computer game Starfleet Command, you've probably fought this battle quite a few times yourself. So this is just one possible way it could turn out. We did not pre-script the outcome of it. So so we war game this out and just see who would win. So we will, let's see.
Who's we, by the way? Did you say that already?
No, I did not. So I will not tell who played what, but it was myself.
You got your butt kicked, didn't you?
Well, whether I won or lost, I would try not to rub it in. So I will attempt to refer to things as the Constitution class cruiser or the Klingon battle cruiser. So it ends up being a learning exercise for everybody. So But as we see here, it's a nice scale picture, a little briefing going on, a little briefing at on the Enterprise. I believe they had both the ships up on a screen and so that they could analyze the ship. Just a little screen capture I got from one of the episodes.
That's from the. Is that from the new remastered episodes?
I do not know. There's a decent chance, but I like to think that that picture would be a little less grainy. However, that still could be remastered. So
Okay.
I do not know. But let's see. Let's take a look at our little laser pointer here. So the Constitution class cruiser, it has basically 8 phasers on it. Okay, it according to Starship Spotter and several other sources, including ships of the Starfleet, it carries 447/54 single mount phaser emplacements. So it's in banks of 2. So really what we have we've got 2 phasers up front, which can basically fire out the front half of the ship. You have 2 more phasers on this side of the saucer, 2 more phasers on this side of the saucer. Now, I know in the ship, we only ever see them fire from the little bulb down below, but, and as much as there were many problems with this particular battle on screen, in that season 2 finale of Discovery, we actually got to see the phaser batteries on the hull or on the saucer firing in the various directions that actually comport with stuff that we've seen in many of the games. So that was one piece of it that I really liked. And then the Bonhomme Richard upgrade to the Constitution class cruiser had 2 aft phasers mounted here right over the shuttle bay. So that covered up or that fixed basically a big blind spot in the for the Constitution class cruiser. And then of course it had 2 photon torpedo tubes that could fire basically, forward of the ship. And that was its heavy ship killing punch. Otherwise, strong shields, real durable ship, good scientific capabilities and sensor capabilities. Probably more accurate phasers than the probably its phasers are more accurate than the Klingon disruptors. But what the Klingon lacks in subtlety and finesse and the ability for precision strikes makes up for with a lot more guns. So it has basically 6 hull-mounted disruptors. You see there's one here and one here on the edge. And obviously that gives it a great range of fire, fires forward and off to the rear. This other one back here, this other one over here lets it fire off the port side and out front. Underneath, on the underside, right here and here, there are 2 more disruptors. And that gives it some pretty good firing arcs forward. Since it's on the underside, the engine would constitute a blind arc for part of it. Of course, space is 3-dimensional, so the ship can pitch, roll, and yaw to make up for some of that. And then we also see phaser banks or disruptor banks, right here and over here, and that basically gives its important starboard firing capability. In addition, from the TV show, we've seen that they carry heavy disruptors here on the engine mounts, at the front of the engine mounts. Probably makes it a nice convenient place to draw warp power and warp plasma from, since it's mounted on the warp engines, and those are its heavy disruptors. And then we've also seen that they have photon torpedoes out front even on the old D7. So that's basically the matchup. The D7, it's not quite as well shielded. It's more maneuverable. It lacks the scientific capability and some of the durability. And like we talked about with Starfleet ships, the Constitution class is an explorer. It's meant for long duration trips, which means it's got more comfortable crew quarters. And recreational facilities, but that means you can stay out in space longer. Klingons, of course, don't care for that kind of stuff, so there's no good solid information on the range of a Klingon battlecruiser. But they're roughly comparable, but I would generally estimate that a D7 is roughly, 85, 90% the combat capability of a Constitution class cruiser. And of course, they were upgraded, and there were multiple variants throughout their career. The Constitution class, and as we see in Axanar, around 2245 during the war, that's when we see the D7 in the Constitution, and it's kind of an arms race to see who can get the ship out. Get and build more of them to get into the fight. All right, so we step into the holodeck here, and the battle will play out. So
for those who don't recognize that, that's an app called Tabletop Simulator, which has the functionality of, wait for it, it simulates a tabletop up to and including when you're designing it, you get to pick which type of table it uses.
Yes.
And I will freely admit that when I first saw this thing, I thought it was like it was just another instance of, like, Apple was famous for a while, where if you bought an ebook, it displayed the ebook on a fake wood bookshelf. And it's like, why are you doing this? It's a computer. Just give me a list of all the different things in alphabetical order. I don't waste space by having this picture of a real world object that doesn't exist anywhere except in the screen. And so my original thought was that this was kind of a waste of time. But then when I played it, I realized I'm actually totally and completely wrong about that. That the motif of doing it on a tabletop like that means that if you've played the game in person, you only have to explain about 4 things to people, like, how do you pick something up, how do you drop it, how do you navigate around, how do you log in. Once you've done those things, it's like, okay, you know everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how to play Monopoly, right? All you need to know is, like, the 4 controls on how to manipulate this thing, and now you can just go play Monopoly. There's no learning a new user interface to it. So it's actually pretty cool. I do not get any money from the people who make Tabletop Simulator. I'm just a satisfied customer. So
yeah, I've really enjoyed Tabletop Simulator. So it's been
back to you, Pat.
And yeah, so Tabletop Simulator. If you're still trapped inside and all that kind of stuff, then by all means pick it up. I think it's like $20, and there's lots of games on there. So, there we go. Okay, so here's the situation. Around Donatu 5, the USS Essex is in orbit. Klingon battlecruiser has been detected approaching the system, has dropped out of warp, and is approaching at high impulse. So throughout the battle, I'll have a little over here. So here's the Essex over here on the other side of the planet. Klingon battlecruiser is over here, and it is approaching at high impulse. And then we have, for the shield status of each of the ships, we've got the heavy cruiser here. Blue means pretty much full power. Then green means it's damaged, 50 to 75%. Then yellow, then red, and then black when the shield is actually down. So you can kind of keep up to the minute tabs on the shields, because that has a big impact on how ships choose to maneuver during the battle. Now, so there we go. So the Klingons approaching at high speed. The Federation cruiser's just coming around and detects the Klingon in approach. Now, Here we go. So basically, like we talked about in one of the earlier briefs, oh, and then there's also a little time right here. So it's 1826. The captain was just about to get off shift and go get dinner when they got notice of a Klingon battlecruiser coming. So of course he probably going to stick around on the bridge. Anyways, so of course the Federation captain is going to raise shields. He's going to arm weapons. He's going to order Helm to break orbit, and he's going to accelerate up to 1/2 impulse power. Now, impulse power is, like we talked about, full impulse, according to the Next Generation Technical Manual, is about 25% of light speed. So presumably they could all travel in a straight line or roughly straight line at higher speeds. But, we usually hear them 1/4, 1/2, or full impulse power when they're traveling around at sublight. So right now the range here is about 1.1 million kilometers. And they're currently closing at about 0.3 C. So 30% the speed of light is about what they're closing at right now, though the Klingon begins to decelerate. That's interesting. Hang on just a moment. One minor technical thing. There we go. Okay. So, now the Klingon, like I said, the Klingon's approaching. Fed's broken orbit. He's starting to arm his weapons. The Klingon's coming in. Weapons are armed, and they're approaching each other. So this is where we'd be cueing the fight music in Star Trek. So next, now we're at about 750,000 kilometers. The Klingon slows to about 0.16 C, so a little bit over 1/2 impulse power, and the captain is given the order to basically turn to about 080. So the mark 002, that's all just made up, but the 080 is what would be, and you see the compass rose over here. That would be basically, an easterly direction in the direction it's pointing. Federation ships' weapons are armed and ready, and shields are at maximum power as they approach each other. So the Klingon has locked on, and at about a range of 560,000 kilometers, the Klingon launches some photon torpedoes, basically a pair of photon torpedoes. They hit on the Essex's forward shield, but it's been reinforced. They had it up to full power, so it's only down to 93%. So not not exactly a devastating first blow. But the problem but now the Federation ship can fire back. And the captain's conscience would be clear. So in this case, the Klingon has begun evasive maneuvers now that he's fired his torpedoes from long range. At about 300,000 kilometers, the Federation cruiser bears to the right and fires his port and forward phasers into the Klingon's front shield. The evasive maneuvers didn't fool the Federation gunners, and the Klingon shields are down to about 66%. In addition, the captain had ordered that had ordered his gunners to target basically engineering and engine type systems on the Klingon ship, and the Klingon loses auxiliary power in the attack. So next, the So now they're at next. The Klingon ship has turned hard to the left, still turning evasively, but it's bearing down on the Federation cruiser. You see the Federation ship keeps firing its port phasers now, and basically has them on continuous fire, and so the Klingons' forward shield is dropped down to about 50% in this attack. But meanwhile, of course, the Klingon ship is still closing and turning towards the Federation heavy cruiser. So the Klingons, they hold their fire, and at about they do a little bit more damage to the Federation, or I'm sorry, to the Klingons' front shield, and the Klingons continue to hold their fire and be patient at this point. So, but they're maneuvering evasively and aggressively towards the Essex. So the captain sees this, realizes he's probably not going to outturn the Klingon, which can outmaneuver him. So he orders the helmsman to extend away and begins to accelerate, just try to get some range, get a little distance on the Klingon cruiser. The Klingon orders his helmsman to be ready to stop evasive maneuvers, and is basically ordering their weapons officer to be ready to fire. Okay. So in this next instance, the Federation ship basically flew straight at high speed. The Klingon continued to make a hard left turn. And basically the Klingons put a lot of power to its thrusters and its structural integrity field and its impulse drive to make as tight a turn as it can, while the Federation ship accelerates above past 1/2 impulse power. The Essex also fires aft phasers at the Klingon shield. So I don't know if you remember the brief I gave on sort of basic tactics, but this is a case where we do have the Klingon aggressively chasing the Federation heavy cruiser. It's kind of exactly the situation we talked about in there. The Klingon feels like he's winning, but the Federation player has been able to concentrate phasers against the Klingon's front shield the entire time, while the Klingon is setting up, thinks he's setting up a nice shot. So if we look at the shield, however, the Klingon does fire all of his disruptors and all his hull-mounted disruptors and all his heavy disruptors, basically held his fire all the way around and basically completely knocks out the aft shield on the Federation heavy cruiser and actually causes quite a bit of damage inside. So the Klingon the Essex does take some damage, and the most important of which, probably some sensors and targeting systems were degraded a bit on the Essex. So in this case, the Federation captain calls hard to starboard because he wants to face a better shield to the attacking Klingon ship. And so anyways, like I said, he's accelerated away. The Klingon had to go slower to make that hard turn, while the Federation ship accelerated away and also makes a hard turn to turn the starboard shields towards the Klingon. And that way he doesn't get shot twice into a down shield. So as we see here, though, the Federation ship has turned his aft shield is down, but he has turned it away from the Klingon. The Klingon ship, smelling blood, decides to take the risk with the badly damaged front shield and keep pressing his attack. So the Klingon torpedoes, but by this point, the Klingon torpedoes are almost rearmed, and so far nobody's been able to make, damage control really hasn't had time to take any effect at this point. So they're both, or the Federation cruiser still got a little bit of damage. So with his weapons fully rearmed again, the Klingon fires all weapons and disruptors and torpedoes. And but fortunately for the Fed heavy cruiser, he was able to turn the starboard shield towards the Klingon ship, and so that absorbed the majority of the attack. It did do some damage because, there's always going to be some bridge panels explode and some rocks fall out of the ceiling and stuff like that. So no doubt somebody got burned, or a panel probably exploded on the Federation bridge. But again, some additional minor damage. The Federation ship takes a little bit of structural damage, but it also fires its starboard phasers at the Klingon and lowers the Klingon's front shield. Let's see here. So now, as we see over here, Klingon ship took a hit as well. Its front shields are now down. So the Federation ship has two shields down, it's taken some damage. The Klingon ship has a front shield down, but hasn't really taken much damage yet. But of note, the Federation ship has not fired his photon torpedoes yet. So those are still sitting hot in the torpedo tubes, ready to go. If they can get this Klingon, if he can get this Klingon off his tail. All
Foreshadowing.
Well, the Fed's going to fire his torpedoes at some point somewhere. So maybe it'll be a good shot. Maybe it'll be a bad shot. We'll see how it turns out. Okay. Oh, let's see here. Neat feature. Here we go. So this lets us zoom in a little bit. So, and then we come back out. All right, here we go. So in this particular case, the Essex turns away. He's already lost his, there's no good reason to keep turning to the right because the Essex has already lost his starboard shield. But shields also kind of get re-energized slowly over time. Not enough to take multiple, hits on the same shield. But right now they both have down shields facing each other, but they're also both out of weapons. So, but the Essex is turned away at high speed, and the Klingon, who had pretty much put most of his power at this point to his weaponry, has not poured quite as much power into the impulse engines to accelerate like the heavy cruiser, like the Federation heavy cruiser has. So Federation heavy cruiser is able to get a little bit of range. So there we see. And if you can see each of these boxes, so if we were going to talk about the actual distance, each of these boxes you see here would be about 37,000 kilometers. So the actual location of the Klingon cruiser, they're not in visual range. The actual location of the Klingon cruiser would be the very center of that counter icon, and it would be a microscopic speck of dust on the scale that we're talking about. And they're about 300,000 kilometers from each other at this point. So within effective phaser and beam range at this point. Now, the Klingon has fired all his forward weapons, but he still has some starboard and some port disruptors that he has not fired yet. So the Klingon captain's going to order a gentle turn to starboard, to port, to bring to bear his starboard guns, which can't quite hit the Federation cruiser at this angle. And so if the Klingon can, actually, let's zoom that in here. So if the Klingon can turn to the left a little bit Oh, it goes back. Wow, interesting. Okay, so if the Klingon can turn to the left in this direction, he can bring his starboard guns to bear, possibly on the aft shield of the Federation cruiser. So let's see what happens. So again, the Klingon cruiser was able to accelerate a little bit. And as we can see here, made a gentle left turn, which also means he's got his starboard shields facing the Federation ship, fires some hull-mounted disruptors. However, some of those aft shields had regenerated, as we can see here. And the Federation ship takes a light hit on the aft shield, but it ends up bringing that shield back. The Federation's aft shield regenerated some, and the disruptor was not enough to penetrate the weakened shield yet. So it was basically inconsequential. So the captain at this point is ordering the helm to stand by to cut speed. Right about now, the Federation heavy cruiser has slowed down to just a little bit above 1/4 impulse power. And the captain has told the helm to stand by to cut speed and then emergency turn to the port, and has ordered his weapons to stand by. So at this point, it looks pretty gloomy for the Federation heavy cruiser. All the Klingon has to do now is rearm its weapons, make another turn to the right, and blast through this weakened aft shield of the Federation ship. The Essex captain knows this, and he has to do something desperate. So he's got to make a hard left turn to bring a new shield and probably some fresh weapons to bear as well. So the aft shield's down to 16%. The starboard shield is down. And the other thing that happened is the aft phasers are now inoperative. They went offline due to some of the damage. Its structural integrity is down to 73%, but its photon torpedoes are ready. So the Essex is slowed down. Let's see here. Like I said, yeah. And so this should have been a hint to the Klingon that something was coming, because the Federation ship is starting to slow down. It went from running away to slowing down. One of the reasons you might slow down is so you can turn more tightly. But at this point, the Klingon is undamaged except for some minor engine damage caused by some of those pinpoint phaser strikes from the Essex. But the Klingon's forward shield is down, and that's also where all his heavy weapons fire. So there's a definite trade-off there for the Klingon. So after the Klingon had fired his starboard disruptors, he basically at this point wants to bring his port weaponry. So let's zoom in here. So the Klingon at this point wants to bring his port weapons to bear, but he doesn't want to, but he wants to minimize the exposure to the front shield, because right now he's got maybe a little bit of time because the aft phasers are down. So the Klingon orders a hard right turn to bring the port shields to bear and to bring the port weapons to bear on the Federation ship. So the Federation ship, or the Essex captain, orders, imagine the good tense music, Star Trek fight music going on at this point, and the captain says, "Helm now," or "execute," or something dramatic like that. And the Essex makes a hard left 180-degree turn and basically hits the brakes. It wasn't a hit the brakes, he'll fly right by. It was hit the brakes and hit them in the face, basically. So the Federation ship puts full power to bring the ship to a stop, full power to its thrusters and its impulse engines to make a hard left turn or an emergency left turn. And the other thing the Federation captain emphasized here was to be accurate, not to fire first, but to fire accurately in this particular case. So the Klingons actually did get to fire their weapons a brief instant before the Federation ship did. However, as we can see here, the Federation's front shields are pristine, not damaged at all, or at least not significantly. They were at like 93%, I believe, from that earlier photon strike. So the Federation shields held despite the Klingons' massive attack, and then the Essex weapons officer makes a very carefully aimed attack, which hits the Klingons' forward shield. And the amount of damage the Klingon takes is pretty significant. There we go. There's a close-up of the phasers and the photon torpedoes going in and damaging the Federation or the Klingon ship. Let's see here. So this is basically the final result after the attack. I thought this slide was hidden, but we'll talk about it anyway since it's here. If we look, here is the Klingons' weaponry. Remember the 6 disruptors we talked about? 5 of them were damaged. Its sensors were damaged. Its shield generators are almost gone. It's down to 75% power. It's got system damage throughout the ship, and it's down to about 69% hull integrity, and its photon torpedoes are damaged as well. So the Klingon's ability to accomplish his mission and continue the fight against the Federation cruiser is pretty minimal. And let's see here. And then looking at the Essex, we'll see that the Essex managed to spread the damage around all its shields, and it was repairing and restoring shields throughout the battle. So during that chase, the Essex was restoring shield power. All these blue boxes here represent the forward shields, and it was down to about 8% shields on its front shields, but they held. And meanwhile, all the Essex's weapons are still in perfectly good shape, except the aft weapons. And so there would still be a fight if both sides wanted to fight to the death. There would still be quite a fight here. But starships are not cheap, and you've got to weigh the mission objective against the cost of one of your cruisers. And at this point, with most of their weapons down, the Klingons made the election to warp out and get away, live to fight another day. So as it turns out, today is not a good day to die.
When danger reared its ugly head, they bravely turned their tail and fled. So, I noticed, go back one.
Okay.
So it looks like you said that Constitution class was down to 8%, but the shield is still blue.
Right. So here we go.
Is it
to do? Oh, I see. Yes, that shield should be red. You're right. That's what I get for not fully murder boarding the brief.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
That should be red right there.
Is that so? That's a graphic that you put on the slides, not one that was that's generated in the tabletop simulator iteration of the game.
Correct. It would be nice if it generated a nice little floating hologram, but it does not. At least not yet.
I was really impressed by the fact that it generated a nice little floating hologram. I thought that was really, really cool that it generated a nice little floating hologram. Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That explains that. So, how long have you been working on this game, Pat?
About 2 years. About 2 years.
Is that all? I thought it was a little bit longer than that.
Maybe 2.5 at this point, because I know you were in on a couple of the early play tests and stuff like that when I was in Richmond. Visited Richmond that one day. You and Arias.
There was so there was the one in Richmond, but there was also, where was that hotel?
No, that hotel I believe was in Richmond. But then there was another time where we went over to Arias's house.
You're right. You're right.
And did it there too. So
I want to say there was one with just you and me.
There may have been.
Maybe in Louisville or Cincinnati.
Not sure. That one I don't.
No, it wasn't Louisville, but you flew into Cincinnati one time, and I want to say that.
Right. Yes, I did. I flew into Cincinnati.
Did we play? I can't remember if we played or we just went out to dinner.
I think we just went out to dinner.
Okay. All right. So.
Yep. So yes, this has been just kind of a personal project. We play this pretty frequently, but it's trying to take what we, all the information we now have about Star Trek 50 years later that FASA and all the other people who made games didn't have about the ships and the tech manual stuff and all that kind of thing, and to try to make it as true to Star Trek as possible. Obviously, with all the conflicting information and beta canon and all that kind of stuff, there's at some point you just have to make choices over stats on ships and stuff like that.
Yeah, and in some ways I think that's actually kind of liberating, because the writers didn't feel compelled to follow the why should you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's we've basically one of the big documents that we used was ships of the Starfleet. So and that gives a lot of different upgrades of the entire Constitution class lineage, all the way up from the lowly Constitution class from 2245 all the way to the Enterprise and the Enterprise A class all the way up, and Miranda's, and then they've got frigates and other smaller ships in there too. So
I love those books. They were very well done.
Let's see here. So but no, there's no 3D maneuvering in this particular game, it's simple two-dimensional game.
So Bob asks, sign us up. Where do we buy this game?
Still working on all the rules and stuff like that, but unfortunately can't. I don't have a Star Trek license or anything, so this is very much a homebrew. But yeah, it's like I said, we think it's a pretty fun game. We've been playing it for a few years, but
it's a homebrew. It's also a homebrew designed to be more than just Star Trek.
Yes. Yeah, the initial project name was Universal Starship Simulator. So, but we just decided to use Star Trek as the veneer for it, so that to test the game, because we love Star Trek. But someday hope to do maybe Babylon 5 or Battlestar Galactica or something like that with it too, or maybe some other properties. But yeah, still working on fleshing out the rules. Going through Grammarly and 50 or 60 pages with Grammarly pointing out all of your deficiencies as a human being. I mean, as a writer, slogging through all my deficiencies is taking some time, but I'm working through it slowly.
Yeah, it's been interesting watching it develop over time.
So, did you see any particular mistakes anybody made?
The thing I find most interesting about it is that D7 finished with 3 good shields, but not one in the direction that he really needed, considering where his weapons are.
Exactly. Yep. And that was it. The Constitution class cruiser, the Essex, there kind of pulled at Captain Kirk, I think, because make you feel like you're doing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the essence of a lot of Star Trek combat seems to be basically rolling to take the blow on another part of your ship that isn't yet in danger of going away.
Yeah.
And so the Constitution seemed to do a better job of sort of spreading that damage out.
Yep, that's exactly right. Spread out the damage. And in a note from the captain, my tactical plan was to get the D7 to keep hitting every shield that I had reinforced while I damaged the D7's front shield enough that when I finally turned into him with my torpedoes, would blast him much harder than he got me. So he was willing to take some initial small hits so that he could focus his firepower on one shield.
I seem to recall that Muhammad Ali won a world title that way. I mean, this is basically the rope-a-dope strategy in its own way.
Yep. It's what was it? It is the principle, I believe, is allow your enemies useless actions while preventing their useful actions. So yeah. And I will say I won a few tournament championships frequently by making the other person think that they were winning.
Yeah. Ken Burnside said it could be worse, sic Grammarly, on something written by an Intel analyst. There's some truth to that. The thing that most people don't understand, I mean, most people don't have the opportunity to see stuff that was written by Intel analysts. It's a very stylized form of writing for very specific reasons. It is the way it is. It is not just free form independent prose by any stretch of the imagination. And so the rules of Intel writing are a little different than the rules of just other types of writing. So I actually think that they spent too much effort trying to make it not boring. In all seriousness, because like the right answer in a lot of ways, there are times where bullets would have been more useful than complete sentences, and there were lots of times where they said, vary your usage, and then it gives you a little chart that says that usually and most often, well, I forget the exact words, but these words are equivalent, where it's like, no, it really should be that, like, if you say usually, you should always say usually. You shouldn't say that these words are all synonyms and you should interpret them the same way. Just use the same damn word. But strangely, the intelligence community is like several 100,000 people, and for some strange reason, I couldn't convince them all. So, oh well.
Yep. So, well, so anyways, I hope everybody enjoyed it. If you guys liked it, maybe we can do another one of these and figure out something for next week. So appreciate everybody joining us tonight. Please like and continue to like and subscribe and share. Share this show with other people that might enjoy it. So
do all those things they tell you to do in other YouTube videos.
Yes, all those things. Do them, please. We'd appreciate it.
One last thing I'll toss out here. I'm actually running a professional wargaming conference. 12 through 14 April is the core hours of the conference. It's from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I describe that time zone as Los Angeles to London, or Washington State to Warsaw, or however you want to describe it. Just if you do a search for the words Connections Online, you'll find the web page for it, and it'll tell you how to register for it. Registration goes up in the next day or so. But it's also got extended hours in addition to those core hours on those 3 days. There's some stuff that starts on the 10th and it goes potentially as late as the 18th. Like game demo nights and stuff like that. So, but that's what's keeping me busy these days. I spent about 4 hours working on that conference today and about 2 hours working on some other work-related stuff. So, so if those of you are interested in what a professional wargaming conference looks like, check out Connections Online.
All right.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. So.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Chris, thank you. And unless you have anything else.
No, I think we're done.
We can call it a night.
I will say that I haven't gotten around to putting comments in for the last couple of shows. I haven't forgot it. I always grab the comments. It's just I've been insanely busy. I need to get caught up on that. So, but that's it.
All right.
See you later.
Have a good night. Have a great week, everybody. Stay safe. Bye now.